My name is Myra, and I'm 59 years old. For 35 years of marriage, I've spent every Thanksgiving alone, while my husband Thomas and our kids disappeared for their annual hunting trip. I never questioned it until I found a receipt for plane tickets to Colorado, not Michigan. This year, something inside me snapped. I decided to follow them. What I discovered shattered my entire world and everything I thought I knew about my family. Before I tell you what I discovered, let me know where you're watching from and click that subscribe button if you've ever felt something wasn't quite right in your relationship. I met Thomas during my sophomore year of college. He was tall, with kind blue eyes, and a smile that made my heart skip a beat. We dated for 3 years before getting married when I was 24 and he was 27. We were young in love and ready to build our lives together. Our early years were beautiful. We bought a small starter home in a quiet neighborhood, painted every room ourselves, and planted a garden in the backyard. Thomas worked as an accountant while I taught 4th grade at the local elementary school. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. William came along 2 years after we got married. Our son was the spitting image of his father with the same blue eyes and sandy blonde hair. 3 years later, we welcomed Julia, our headstrong daughter with my dark hair and her father's smile. Our family felt complete. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect American family. Thomas was promoted to senior accountant at his firm. I eventually became the elementary school's vice principal. We moved to a bigger house in a better neighborhood. The kids joined sports teams and excelling academically. We hosted summer barbecues for neighbors and went on annual family vacations to Florida. Everything seemed perfect except for one peculiar tradition in our family. Every year, without fail, Thomas would take William and Julia away for Thanksgiving. The tradition started when William was just 5 and Julia was 2. Thomas explained it was a special father-children bonding trip. They would go to his family's old cabin in northern Michigan for a 4-day hunting expedition. It was supposedly a tradition passed down from Thomas's father. It's important for them to connect with nature, Thomas would say, to understand where our food comes from and to appreciate family traditions. I didn't question it at first. I thought it was sweet that Thomas wanted special time with the children. Besides, his brother Andrew would join them some years with his sons. It seemed innocent enough. I'd spend Thanksgiving with my sister or friends, always setting aside leftovers for my family when they returned. As the years passed, this arrangement became our normal. While other families gathered around tables piled high with turkey and stuffing, I was either alone or a guest at someone else's celebration. I decorated our home with autumn wreaths and cornucopias that only I would see. I baked pumpkin pies that cooled on the counter until my family returned, usually too full from their own Thanksgiving meal to enjoy more than a small slice. You should join us sometime, Thomas would occasionally offer, knowing I had no interest in hunting. I'm not sitting in a cold cabin watching you shoot at animals, I'd reply, and that would be the end of the conversation. I accepted this tradition as part of our marriage, a small sacrifice in an otherwise happy life. I told myself it was healthy for couples to have separate interests and time apart. But as the children grew older, I expected things to change. Julia developed an interest in photography and art, not hunting. William went to college and met Amy, who soon became his wife. Yet the tradition continued. Even after our children moved out, they would return each November to join their father for the Thanksgiving hunting trip, leaving their own partners behind. It wasn't until last year that I began noticing strange things. Thomas seemed more excited than usual about the upcoming trip. He was constantly checking his phone, smiling at text messages he quickly deleted. I caught him on a late-night call in his office, speaking in hushed tones. When I walked in, he abruptly ended the conversation. "Just confirming details with Andrew," he explained, but something in his voice sounded off. Then there were the gifts. Thomas had always brought back small souvenirs from their trips, usually local jams or handcrafted items. But last year, I found a receipt in his coat pocket for an expensive silver bracelet. When I asked about it casually, he claimed it was a Christmas present for me. Yet when December came, no bracelet appeared under our tree. The kids were acting strange too. Julia, now 30, usually shared photos from their trips on social media, pictures of the cabin, the woods' occasional wildlife. But when I mentioned looking forward to seeing her Thanksgiving photos last year, she became evasive. "Oh, I'm taking a break from posting," she said, trying to be more present in the moment. William, 33, and typically straightforward, changed the subject whenever I asked about their plans for this year's trip. Then 2 months ago, I was organizing Thomas's home office when I found an old photograph tucked inside a book. It showed a young woman with auburn hair, probably from the early 80s, based on the style. She was laughing, her head thrown back, sitting on what looked like a park bench. I didn't recognize her, and when I asked Thomas about it, he became flustered. "Just an old college friend," he said, taking the photo and returning it to the book. "I use it as a bookmark." But I saw the way he looked at the picture before putting it away. There was something in his eyes I couldn't quite place. Nostalgia, longing. Whatever it was, it planted a seed of doubt in my mind. For the first time in 35 years, I began to wonder what really happened during those Thanksgiving trips. The doubts that had taken root in my mind began to grow as this year's Thanksgiving approached. Thomas was on his phone more than usual, often stepping outside to take calls. He claimed they were work-related, but Thomas was semi-retired now, only consulting occasionally. What work calls could be so urgent and private? One evening in early November, I was searching for our passports in Thomas's desk drawer when I found something that made my heart stop. Flight confirmations, not for Michigan, but for Denver, Colorado. 3 tickets, Thomas, William, and Julia. The departure date was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. When Thomas came home that night, I casually mentioned the upcoming trip. "So the cabin in Michigan again this year?" I asked, watching his reaction carefully. He didn't even flinch. "Yes, same as always. Andrew might bring his new girlfriend this time." The lie slipped so easily from his lips that I wondered how many others he had told me over the years. I decided not to confront him immediately. If Thomas and our children had been keeping secrets for years, I needed to understand the full scope before saying anything. The next day, I called Amy, Williams' wife. They had been married for 5 years, and like me, Amy stayed behind during the annual hunting trip. "Do you ever wonder what they really do up there?" I asked her over a coffee in my kitchen. Amy shrugged. "Will says it's mostly sitting in the cold, drinking beer, and occasionally shooting at deer. Sounds boring to me. I'm happy to skip it and go to my parents' place." "Has William been acting different lately when talking about the trip?" Amy thought for a moment. "Now that you mention it, he's been making a lot of private calls. I assumed it was about my Christmas present, but—" She trailed off. "You think something's going on?" I didn't want to plant my suspicions in her mind, so I changed the subject, but our conversation confirmed that I wasn't imagining things. A week later, I was putting away laundry when I heard Thomas on the phone in our bedroom. He didn't hear me approaching. "I can't wait to see you too," he was saying, his voice warm in a way it rarely was anymore with me. "Yes, everything's arranged. No, she doesn't suspect anything. I know it's been too long." He noticed me standing in the doorway and quickly ended the call. "Andrew," he explained, but his ears had turned red, something that happened only when he was lying. That night I checked his credit card statement online. There were charges from a jewelry store in Denver from just 3 days ago. An expensive purchase, much more than he typically spent on gifts for me. As I scrolled through the statement, I noticed a pattern. Every November for years, there were charges from restaurants and shops in Colorado, not Michigan. How had I never checked before? I simply trusted him, believed the stories about the cabin, the hunting trips. I felt like a fool. The next morning, I called Julia under the pretense of asking what to prepare for when they returned from their trip. "You know what would be nice," I said, "if you took some pictures of the cabin this year. I realized I've never actually seen it." There was a pause on the line. "Mom, it's just an old cabin, nothing special to see." "Still, I'd like to know where my family spends their holidays. Maybe next year I could join you." "You'd hate it," Julia said quickly. It's rustic, no modern amenities. You always say you prefer a proper bathroom. Another lie. My daughter, who used to tell me everything, was now part of whatever deception Thomas had created. That evening I was cleaning up after dinner when Thomas mentioned casually, I was thinking about our early days today. Oh, what brought that on? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Just reflecting. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? The roads we choose, the ones we don't. Do you have regrets? I asked, watching him carefully. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Not regrets exactly, just wondering about other paths. In that moment I knew. There was someone else. Had been for years, possibly decades. The hunting trips, the lies, the secret calls and gifts. It all pointed to a double life that my husband and eventually my children had been keeping from me. But who was she? And how had this deception been maintained for so long? As Thanksgiving drew closer, William and Julia both called more frequently than usual, checking if I had plans for the holiday. Mrs. Peterson invited me for dinner. I told them, referring to my elderly neighbor, another lie to add to our family collection, but I needed them to believe I would be safely occupied while they were gone. The truth was, I had made very different plans. For the first time in 35 years, I was going to find out exactly how my family spent Thanksgiving. The decision to follow my family didn't come easily. For days, I wavered between confronting Thomas directly and continuing my investigation. What finally pushed me over the edge was finding Thomas packing summer clothes for their supposedly cold weather hunting trip. Planning for unusually warm weather in Michigan, I asked, gesturing to the light sweaters and casual pants in his suitcase. The cabin has good heating, he replied without hesitation. Another lie, smooth as butter. That night I went online and booked a flight to Denver, leaving Wednesday morning one day after my family would depart. I found a small hotel about 20 minutes outside the city, guessing they wouldn't stay in Denver proper if they were maintaining the pretense of a rustic getaway. I needed a cover story in case anyone checked on me, so I told Mrs. Peterson I was visiting my college roommate for Thanksgiving. I asked her to collect my mail and water the plants, making sure to mention this loudly during a phone call while Thomas was in the next room. The week before their departure was excruciating. I moved through our home like a ghost, watching my husband of 35 years pack for a trip built on decades of deception. I studied his face over dinner, wondering how I could have missed the signs for so long. Had I been willfully blind, or was Thomas simply that good at compartmentalizing his life? The morning they were set to leave, I prepared a special breakfast, pancakes with maple syrup, Thomas's favorite. I played the role of the devoted wife, seeing her family off on their annual tradition. You sure you'll be okay by yourself? Thomas asked as he loaded bags into the car. I'll be fine, I assured him. Just like every year. He kissed me goodbye, a quick peck on the cheek. I'll call you on Thanksgiving Day. William and Julia hugged me too, their embraces stiff and quick. Were they feeling guilty? Did they understand the magnitude of their betrayal? They had chosen to protect their father's secret over their relationship with me. After they drove away, I called the one person I trusted completely, Susan, my best friend since college. She was the only one who knew about my plan. I still think this is a bad idea, Myra, Susan said when I confirmed I was going through with it. What if you find something you can't unknow? Are you prepared for that? I've been living with lies for 35 years, I replied. Whatever truth I find can't be worse than that. But as I packed my own suitcase that evening, doubt crept in. Was I making a terrible mistake? Would discovering the truth destroy what family I had left? I almost canceled my flight. Then I remembered the look in Thomas's eyes when he saw that photograph. The secret calls, the gifts, the ease with which he lied to my face. No, I needed answers. The next morning, I drove to the airport with a knot in my stomach. I felt like I was starring in someone else's life, not my own. Myra Williams, school administrator, mother of two, wife of 35 years, was now playing detective, trailing her own family across state lines. As I boarded the plane, I silently rehearsed what I might say if Thomas or the kids somehow spotted me. But deeper than my fear of being discovered was a more terrifying thought. What would I do with the truth once I found it? The flight to Denver was turbulent, matching my emotional state. Every bump and jostle seemed like an omen, warning me to turn back. But beneath my anxiety was a steely determination I hadn't felt in years. For too long, I'd been the accommodating wife, accepting Thomas's traditions without question. That ended now. I landed in Denver Wednesday afternoon. The airport was packed with holiday travelers, families reuniting, college students returning home. I pulled my scarf higher around my face, irrationally worried I might run into my own children in this crowd of thousands. At the rental car counter, I gave a false name for the reservation, another precaution in case Thomas or the kids somehow checked local hotels or rental agencies. I felt ridiculous, like I was playing spy, but I couldn't risk being discovered before I learned the truth. My hotel was small but clean, located in a scenic area outside Denver with views of the mountains. I checked in, dropped off my bags, and immediately opened my laptop. Before leaving home, I had installed tracking software on my phone that would allow me to see the location of William's and Julia's phones, provided they had shared their location with me in our family group. Thankfully, both my children had always kept this feature active, never suspecting their mother would use it to track them. A blue dot showed they were about 45 minutes from my hotel, in a more remote area with the mountain views. I was close, but I still didn't have an exact address. Then I remembered Julia's Instagram. Though she claimed to be taking a break from social media, my daughter was too much of a shutterbug to completely stop posting. Sure enough, when I checked her profile, there was a new photo posted just hours ago. A beautiful mountain vista with the caption, "Annual Retreat Mar Blessed, #mountain views." The photo had location data embedded. Bingo. With shaking hands, I entered the coordinates into my GPS. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. After 35 years, I would finally discover where my family really went and who they spent the holiday with. That night, I barely slept. I alternated between righteous anger and crushing doubt. What kind of wife spies on her husband? What kind of mother doesn't trust her children? But then, what kind of husband lies for decades? What kind of children participate in deceiving their own mother? By morning, I was exhausted but resolved. I dressed warmly, bought coffee from the hotel lobby, and set out in my rental car. The drive was beautiful, with snow-capped mountains and pine forests, the kind of scenery that would normally bring me joy. Today, it was just the backdrop to my mission. According to the GPS, I was getting close to the location from Julia's photo. The road narrowed and began to climb houses, becoming more scattered. I slowed down, scrutinizing each property, and then I saw it, Thomas's rental car parked outside a large modern cabin with panoramic windows and a wraparound deck. This was no rustic hunting lodge. This was a luxury mountain retreat. I parked my car about a quarter-mile down the road behind a stand of trees and walked back with my heart pounding in my chest. I found a vantage point behind some bushes where I could see the cabin clearly without being spotted. What I saw next made me gasp. Through the large windows, I could see my family moving around inside. Thomas, William, and Julia were in what appeared to be a spacious kitchen. They were laughing, preparing food, no hunting gear in sight. And with them was a woman about my age with auburn hair streaked with silver. The woman from the photograph, older now but unmistakable. As I watched, frozen in place, Thomas walked up behind this woman and placed his hands on her shoulders. She turned and smiled up at him with such obvious affection that my stomach twisted into knots. William handed her a glass of wine, and Julia showed her something on her phone. They looked comfortable together, familiar. This was clearly not their first meeting. They were preparing a Thanksgiving meal, the kind I had always dreamed of sharing with my family, and they were doing it with this stranger, this woman, who had somehow earned a place in their lives while I was left behind year after year. I sank to the ground, not caring about the cold seeping through my pants. 35 years. 35 Thanksgivings. Had it all been a lie, I remained hidden near the cabin, watching my family through windows that framed them like a holiday commercial. Perfect family preparing the perfect Thanksgiving dinner. Except it wasn't my perfect family anymore. It was Thomas, our children, and this mystery woman with the silver-streaked auburn hair. From my vantage point, I could see them preparing the meal. The woman seemed to be directing everything, pointing to cupboards and drawers with the confidence of someone who knew the space intimately. This wasn't a rental they had just arrived at. This was somewhere they had been many times before. As the afternoon wore on, more people arrived. A couple about Thomas's age greeted everyone with hugs. The man clapped Thomas on the back like an old friend. Two younger adults who appeared to be in their 20s arrived next, immediately joining William and Julia in animated conversation. They seemed close, comfortable with each other. How many people were in on this secret life? I was shivering partly from the cold and partly from shock, but I couldn't make myself leave. I needed to understand what I was seeing. Who was this woman? How long had Thomas known her? What role did she play in my children's lives? As dusk approached, they turned on lights inside, making it even easier for me to see. They set a large dining table with care, placing a beautiful golden turkey at the center. There were festive decorations, candles, wine glasses. A real Thanksgiving celebration, the kind I had always wanted to share with my husband and children. I inched closer to the cabin, moving from tree to tree, until I was near enough to hear faint snippets of conversation through a partially open window. The cool evening air carried their voices to me in fragments. Remember when Dad burned the turkey that first year? That was Julia's voice, followed by laughter. Catherine saved the day with that honey-glazed ham, William replied. Catherine. Now I had a name. I strained to hear more. Thomas's voice came next, warm and full of affection. 33 Thanksgiving dinners together, and each one better than the last. 33 years. They had been doing this for 33 years, almost the entirety of our marriage. While I sat alone, or as a guest at other people's tables, my husband had been creating holiday traditions with another woman. And our children had grown up with her, knowing her well enough to joke about past Thanksgivings. I felt sick. The cold forgotten replaced by a burning in my chest that threatened to consume me. I wanted to storm in to demand explanations, to scream and throw things, but I forced myself to stay hidden. I needed to know everything before I confronted them. As they gathered around the table, I saw Thomas stand and raise a glass. Though I couldn't hear every word, I caught phrases that cut like knives. Grateful for our time together, the love we've shared, difficult choices, two families. The words echoed in my head. Thomas had built a second family with our children as members of both, and I had been kept in the dark, the unwitting wife, back home. After dinner, they moved to the living room area. Through the windows, I could see them exchanging gifts, another tradition I had missed out on. Catherine opened a small box from Thomas, her face lighting up, the jewelry purchase on his credit card statement. She hugged him tightly, and he kissed her cheek, lingering in a way that spoke of deep intimacy. The younger visitors, who I now suspected might be Catherine's children or relatives, played a board game with William and Julia. They interacted like people who had known each other for years, teasing and laughing. I must have shifted position or made a noise because suddenly Julia looked toward the window. I ducked down, heart hammering. Had she seen me? I waited, barely breathing, but no one came to investigate. When I dared to look again, the scene inside was unchanged. They were oblivious to my presence, secure in their secret bubble. As the evening progressed, the group broke into smaller conversations. I saw Catherine and Thomas step out onto the deck, wine glasses in hand. They stood close, looking at the stars. I crept closer, keeping to the shadows, desperate to hear what they were saying. Do you ever regret it? Catherine asked, her voice carrying clearly in the still night air. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Regret what? Marrying Myra, or not leaving her for you? My breath caught in my throat. Either. Both, Catherine replied. I regret the deception, Thomas said slowly, but I couldn't bear to lose either life. Myra was a good wife, a good mother. What we built together was real. And us. Thomas turned to her, taking her hand. What we have is real too. Different, but just as real. If I could go back knowing what I know now, he paused, I would have chosen you from the beginning, before commitments were made, before lives were entangled. But now this arrangement is the best I could manage. Arrangement. That's what our marriage had been reduced to, an arrangement that allowed Thomas to live two separate lives. Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder. I've always wondered what would have happened if my parents hadn't moved away senior year, if we hadn't lost those years. We found our way back to each other. That's what matters. Found their way back. So Catherine was someone from his past, a high school girlfriend, first love. Whatever she was, she had remained important enough for Thomas to create this elaborate deception. The couple went back inside, leaving me alone in the darkness with the devastating truth. My husband had been living a double life for decades. My children had been complicit. Every Thanksgiving for 33 years, they had gathered without me, building memories and traditions I knew nothing about. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving Day. I had a decision to make: confront them now, or retreat and pretend I never discovered their secret. The second option would be easier in many ways. Return to my hotel, fly home, and continue the charade. But I knew I couldn't do that. I had lived in ignorance too long. I watched a while longer, gathering details, steeling myself. Then I returned to my car and drove back to my hotel. I needed to prepare for tomorrow. Thanksgiving Day, the day I would finally join my family's true holiday celebration. The morning of Thanksgiving dawned bright and clear sunlight, reflecting off the snow-covered mountains. I stood in my hotel bathroom staring at my reflection. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. There were new lines around her eyes, a hardness to her mouth that hadn't been there before. 24 hours had aged me in ways 35 years hadn't. I dressed carefully in the nicest outfit I had packed, a burgundy sweater and black pants. I applied makeup, methodically, armor against what was to come. My hands shook as I fastened my mother's pearl earrings, a gift from Thomas, on our 20th anniversary. Had he given Catherine jewelry that same year, the drive to the cabin felt both endless and too short. My mind raced with questions and accusations. What would I say? How would they react? Would Thomas deny everything, even with the evidence right before my eyes? When I arrived, I parked directly behind Thomas's rental car. No more hiding. As I walked to the front door, I caught glimpses through the windows of the activity inside. The table was set for Thanksgiving dinner, candles already lit despite the early hour. Everyone was dressed nicely, moving around the kitchen, putting final touches on the meal. One deep breath, then another. I raised my hand and knocked firmly. The laughter and conversation inside immediately dimmed. I heard footsteps approaching, and then the door swung open. Julia stood there, a glass of wine in hand. Her eyes widened in shock, the color draining from her face. "Mom?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Surprise," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. "I thought I'd join the family for Thanksgiving this year." Behind Julia, I could see the others frozen in place. Thomas stood by the fireplace, his face a mask of horror. William had dropped into a chair, his head in his hands. Catherine stood in the middle of the room, clutching a serving dish, confusion etched on her features. I stepped past Julia into the cabin. It was warm and smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon, the home I had never been invited to. "Myra," Thomas found his voice first, moving toward me. "What are you doing here?" "I think that's my question, Thomas. What are you doing here? And who is this?" I gestured to Catherine, who had set down the dish and was now watching me with a strange mixture of fear and compassion. "Mom, please, let's talk about this calmly," William said, standing up. "Calmly? You want me to be calm after discovering my entire family has been lying to me for decades?" My voice rose despite my best efforts to control it. 35 years of Thanksgiving hunting trips, and this is where you've been with her. Catherine stepped forward. "Mrs. Williams, I'm Catherine Lawson. I think you should sit down." "I don't want to sit down in your house, Catherine. I want explanations. From my husband, from my children. I turned to Thomas. Who is she? The room was dead silent. The other guests, the couple, and the younger adults had retreated to another room, giving us privacy for this family implosion. Thomas's shoulders sagged. He suddenly looked every one of his 62 years. Catherine was my high school girlfriend. We were together for 3 years before her family moved across the country our senior year. And, I prompted when he paused, and 2 years after you and I got married, I ran into her at a conference in Denver. She had never married. We started talking and he trailed off, unable to meet my eyes. And you started an affair, I finished for him. It wasn't like that, Catherine interjected. Not exactly. Then what was it exactly? I demanded. Thomas took a deep breath. We reconnected. The feelings were still there, but I had made commitments to you, to our life together. I couldn't just walk away from our marriage from William, who was just a baby then. So instead of making a choice, you decided to have both, I said, the pieces falling into place. These Thanksgiving trips. They started that year, didn't they? The first year you reconnected with Catherine. Thomas nodded slowly. We agreed to have one weekend a year together. Just Thanksgiving. It seemed manageable. Manageable. I repeated the word, tasting bitter on my tongue. And when did the children become part of this arrangement? A heavy silence fell. It was Julia who finally answered, her voice small. We always came, from the beginning. I was too young to remember the first few years, but William might. I turned to my son, disbelief and betrayal washing over me in waves. You knew all this time. William couldn't meet my eyes. Not at first. When I was little, I just thought Catherine was Dad's friend. As I got older, I began to understand. And neither of you thought to tell me your mother. Dad asked us not to, Julia said. He said it would hurt you unnecessarily, that what you didn't know couldn't hurt you. I laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Well, he was wrong about that, wasn't he? I turned back to Catherine, really looking at her for the first time. She was attractive, with fine lines around her eyes and mouth that spoke of years of laughter. She wore a simple green dress that complemented her auburn hair. Was this the woman Thomas would have chosen if life had gone differently? And who are the others? I asked, gesturing toward the room where the other guests had disappeared. Jack and Margaret are old friends, Catherine explained gently. The young man and woman are my niece and nephew. They've all been joining us for Thanksgiving for years. One big happy family, I said bitterly. Everyone except me. Thomas tried to approach me, but I backed away. Myra, please, let me explain more fully. Explain what? How you've been living a double life for our entire marriage. How our children have been lying to my face year after year. What possible explanation could make this okay? I never meant to hurt you, Thomas said, and I could see tears in his eyes. I loved you, Myra. I still do in my way. Our life together wasn't a lie. Just every Thanksgiving for 33 years was a lie. Just your hunting trips were a lie. Just the fact that our children have known this woman their entire lives was a lie. I was shaking now, tears threatening to spill over. Catherine stepped forward again. Mrs. Williams, Myra, I know this is a shock and you have every right to be angry, but please know that Thomas always spoke of you with respect. The children, too. They love you very much. Don't, I said sharply, don't pretend you know anything about me or what my children feel for me. You've been the other woman in my marriage for 33 years. You don't get to speak about respect. William and Julia were both crying, now tears streaming down their faces. This wasn't how any of us had imagined spending Thanksgiving. Why did you come here, Mom? Julia asked through her tears. How did you find us? I found the flight confirmations. I saw the Colorado charges on your father's credit card statements going back years. I checked the location on your Instagram post. I listed flatly. It wasn't hard once I started looking. I just never had a reason to look before. There was a long, painful silence. The turkey sat cooling on the table, the candles burning lower, casting dancing shadows on the walls of this house of lies. What happens now? Thomas finally asked, his voice barely audible. I looked around at my family, these people I thought I knew. My husband of 35 years. My son and daughter, now adults with deceptions of their own. And Catherine, the woman who had shared a piece of them I never knew existed. Now, I said, reaching for the door handle, I leave, and you all can continue your perfect Thanksgiving tradition without worrying about keeping it secret anymore. Mom, wait, William called, moving toward me, but I was already out the door, gulping the cold mountain air, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of decades of betrayal. Behind me, I heard Thomas call my name, but I didn't turn back. I got into my rental car and drove away, leaving my family and their secret life behind. As I wound down the mountain road, tears blurred my vision. 35 years. 35 Thanksgiving dinners spent alone, or as a guest at other tables. All while my husband created holiday memories with another woman. All while my children learned to keep secrets from their mother. I had thought discovering the truth would bring clarity. Instead, it had shattered everything I believed about my life. Now I had to decide what to do with the broken pieces. The days following Thanksgiving passed in a blur of grief and anger. I returned my rental car, changed my flight, and was back in our empty house by Friday evening. Thomas and the children were supposed to return on Sunday, as they did every year after their hunting trip. I didn't know if they would keep to that schedule now that their secret was exposed. I moved through our home like a stranger, seeing everything with new eyes. The family photos on the walls felt like props in an elaborate stage play. Thomas's office, where he had made secret calls to Catherine for decades. Our bedroom, where he had slept beside me after spending Thanksgivings with another woman. The first call came Saturday morning. Thomas. I let it go to voicemail. Then William, then Julia. I silenced my phone, not ready to hear their explanations or apologies. Thomas came home Sunday afternoon alone. I was sitting in the living room staring at nothing when he walked in. He looked older, defeated, his shoulders hunched under an invisible weight. Myra, he said softly, we need to talk. Now you want to talk? I replied, after 35 years of lies. He sat across from me, hands clasped between his knees. I never meant for this to happen. Which part? Running into your high school sweetheart, or creating a second life with her? Both. Neither. He sighed deeply. When I saw Catherine's again after all those years, something just clicked back into place. But I had made vows to you. We had William. I couldn't just leave. So instead you decided to have both worlds, to carve out a piece of your life that was just for her. It wasn't supposed to be a permanent arrangement, just a way to get closure, I told myself. But one Thanksgiving became 2, then 3. Before I knew it, years had passed. And the children. How could you involve them in your deception? Thomas's eyes filled with tears. That was my biggest mistake. They were so young at first they didn't understand. By the time they were old enough to question it, the pattern was established. They grew to care for Catherine. I didn't know how to untangle it all without hurting everyone. So you just kept lying, year after year. I'm not proud of it, Myra, but I did love you. Our marriage wasn't a sham. I laughed bitterly. A marriage built on decades of lies. What would you call it? The conversations continued over the next weeks, with Thomas, with William and Julia, each trying to explain their part in the deception, each asking for forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. She was like a second mother to us, Julia explained during one painful talk. We saw her once a year, but she sent birthday cards, kept up with our lives. We didn't know how to tell you without destroying everything. Did you ever consider how I felt alone every Thanksgiving while my family created memories without me? Dad always said you preferred it that way, that you had no interest in the hunting cabin. There was no hunting cabin. It was all a lie. I shouted, my composure finally breaking. Don't you understand? Everything I thought I knew about our family traditions was false. Christmas approached, traditionally a time of togetherness for our family. This year, I couldn't bear the thought of pretending everything was normal. I told Thomas I needed space. He moved into a hotel without argument. I started seeing a therapist trying to make sense of my shattered reality. Dr. Lawrenson helped me understand that while Thomas's betrayal was inexcusable, I had also been complicit in accepting the status quo. You never questioned the Thanksgiving arrangement for 35 years, she pointed out gently. Part of you must have suspected something wasn't right. She was correct. There had been signs over the years, credit card statements I never checked, phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room, the children's evasiveness when discussing their trips. I had chosen not to see because seeing would have meant confronting an uncomfortable truth. In January, I reconnected with friends I had neglected over the years. Susan, who had warned me about following my family, became my rock. Angela, my college roommate, who I hadn't seen in a decade, flew in for a weekend. I told them everything, unleashing the story of betrayal that had been consuming me. "What are you going to do about your marriage?" Angela asked, as we shared a bottle of wine in my kitchen. "I don't know yet," I admitted. Part of me wants to just walk away, but 35 years is a long time to throw away. He threw away 33 Thanksgivings, Susan pointed out, along with honesty and trust. By February, I'd made a decision. I asked Thomas to meet me at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. He arrived early, already seated with 2 cups of coffee when I walked in. "I can't continue our marriage," I said after we exchanged awkward greetings. "Too much has been broken." He nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this. "I understand. I'm not asking for a divorce. Not yet. But I want a separation. I need time to figure out who I am outside of our marriage, outside of the lies." "What about the house?" "You can stay there. I found an apartment near the school. I start moving in next week." "And Catherine?" he asked cautiously. "What you do is your business now. But I need you to understand that this separation isn't just about her. It's about the choices you made, the lies you told, the way you involved our children in your deception." "I do understand," he said softly. "And I'm sorry, Myra. Truly sorry." I believed him, but sorry couldn't erase 33 years of betrayal. Moving into my own place was both terrifying and liberating. At 59, I was living alone for the first time in my adult life. The apartment was small but bright with a view of the park. I furnished it with a few pieces from our home and new items that were just mine. No family photos on the walls yet. Those memories felt tainted now. Spring brought new challenges. William and Amy announced they were expecting their first child. My first grandchild would be born in the fall. Joy mingled with sadness as I wondered what role I would play in this baby's life. Would he or she also be taught to keep secrets? I had a frank conversation with William about this. "I want to be part of my grandchild's life," I told him, "but I need your promise that there will be no more family secrets." "No more secrets," he agreed solemnly. We all learned that lesson the hard way. Summer arrived, bringing warmth and new growth. I took a sabbatical from my job as vice principal to travel. I visited places I had always wanted to see: the Grand Canyon, New Orleans, New York City. I sent postcards to William and Julia, but not to Thomas. In September, my first grandchild was born, a boy they named James. Holding him in the hospital, feeling his tiny fingers wrap around mine, something inside me began to heal. This new life represented a fresh start, a chance to build relationships based on truth. As November approached with another Thanksgiving looming, I made a decision. I called William and Julia and invited them to my apartment for the holiday. "Just you and your partners," I specified. "No Dad, no Catherine." They agreed readily, perhaps surprised I was acknowledging the holiday at all. I spent days preparing, buying a small turkey, baking pies, decorating my new space with the vibrant autumn colors. When Thanksgiving Day arrived, I felt nervous, but determined. This would be my first real Thanksgiving with my children in decades. William and Amy arrived with baby James, followed shortly by Julia and her boyfriend Mark. We gathered in my small living room, the air thick with unspoken emotions. "Before we eat," I said, "I want to say something. This past year has been the hardest of my life. Discovering the truth about our family broke my heart in ways I'm still trying to mend. But I'm grateful for the one thing it gave me the chance to start again, to build relationships based on honesty." There were tears in Julia's eyes. "We're so sorry, Mom. We should have told you years ago." "Yes, you should have," I agreed. "But we can't change the past. We can only decide what kind of future we want to create." That Thanksgiving meal in my small apartment was nothing like the elaborate celebrations Thomas and Catherine had orchestrated over the years. Our turkey was slightly overcooked. We used mismatched chairs around my secondhand table, but every word spoken was true, every emotion genuine. It was the first real Thanksgiving I had shared with my children in 33 years. After dinner, as we sat with coffee and pie, William asked the question I had been expecting. "Have you spoken to Dad recently?" "Not since July," I admitted. "Has he told you anything about his plans?" William and Julia exchanged glances. "He sold the house," Julia said. "He's moving to Colorado next month." I nodded, absorbing this information. So Thomas had made his choice at last. I was surprised by how little pain the news brought. Perhaps I had already done my grieving for the marriage that never was. "And you two? Will you still see him and Catherine?" I tried to keep my voice neutral. "We've talked about it," William said carefully. "We want James to know his grandfather, but things will be different now, more balanced. We won't exclude you from family gatherings anymore." "Thank you," I said simply. As they were leaving, Julia hugged me tightly. "Next year, we should make this a tradition. Thanksgiving at your place." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the mulled cider we had shared. I'd like that. After everyone had gone, I sat in my quiet apartment reflecting on the journey of the past year, from the devastated woman who had spied on her family from the bushes to the person I was becoming now. Stronger, more independent, honest with myself and others. Thomas had made his choice, and now I had made mine. I would not allow the betrayal to define the rest of my life. I would build new traditions with my children and grandchild. I would create a life where truth was valued above comfortable lies. The divorce papers arrived in December, along with a letter from Thomas. He was moving to Colorado permanently to be with Catherine. He had accepted a consulting position there. He was sorry for the pain he had caused, but grateful for the years we had shared and the children we had raised. I signed the papers without hesitation. 35 years of marriage ended with a signature and a notary stamp. It should have felt more momentous, but instead it felt like formally acknowledging a truth that had existed for months. As another year began, I found myself looking forward rather than back. I returned to my position at school with renewed energy. I joined a hiking group and discovered I enjoyed the challenge of mountain trails. I started dating casually, not seeking a replacement for Thomas, but exploring connections that felt honest from the start. When Thanksgiving came around again, we gathered at my apartment as promised. William and Amy brought James, now a toddler, taking his first steps. Julia and Mark announced their engagement. We cooked together, shared stories, built new memories, untainted by deception. Thomas sent a card from Colorado. I read it briefly, then set it aside. His life was his now, as mine was my own. The best Thanksgiving gift I ever gave myself wasn't the turkey or the pumpkin pie, but the courage to finally sit at a table where I was truly valued. Sometimes the empty chair at your table makes more room for self-respect than a marriage built on half-truths ever could. Have you ever discovered a long-kept secret that changed everything you thought you knew about your life? How did you rebuild afterward? I love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others find strength in difficult situations. Remember, it's never too late to choose truth and self-respect even after decades of deception. Thank you for listening, and may your own holiday tables be filled with authentic joy.